afternoon here from Edinburgh, capital city of Scotland. My name is Almond Cap, and I would like to just welcome everybody that's going to just learn a little bit more about Xero today. Here at One Accounting, we'd like to increase efficiencies and also reduce the time spending on accounts and spending more time on focusing on improving business, and also then like to share that with our clients. Therefore, today the plan is to share some tips and shortcuts through to our clients, and that will make it useful for them. Most of these, or some of these, are available on Xero's website, and but this is just a brief summary of what we think could be useful for everybody. What we're going to cover today has basically been grouped into 4 sections. Just a quick way of viewing Xero. A quick look at reporting and some useful information relating the reporting. Look at some of the tricky transactions and shortcut ways to deal with some of these transactions. And also just briefly touch on any of the new things that's come on board that you might not have been made aware of. But that's the short plan for today. But let's get started right away, and please feel free, if you've got any questions, type it up, and we can get back to you, and just to improve efficiencies and helping you get through the day-to-day so much quicker. What we're first going to look at is just the view on Xero. Could be sometimes useful if you want to look at more than one thing at a stage. And what we normally do is we can, especially if you've got multiple screens, you can have the ability to divide your Xero into different screens. So any of the blue markings could be split into a new tab. And how you can do this, for instance, if you want a separate tab, you can either press Control-T, or you can actually press Control and click on the blue highlighted area. For instance, if I want to have a separate tab, I can go in and do a right click on the business banking, and I can actually open it in a new tab, which means I can have multiple tabs at the top, and I can flip back and forward and actually drill down in the transaction. So I can have my report open, for instance, and also go into some of the transactions. The only thing is, on these transactions are, if you change anything, you need to refresh the other page too. So it's very important that you do have to do that. And if you do make changes, you want to see the updated changes in the report itself. Just going back, I've opened a couple of tabs already here, so we can basically work in that and go back and have a look at your original page. So that is useful to have that in a different tab at the top, especially if you've got a report to drag into, or you've got multiple sales invoices and you want to view them one at a time. And you can basically go into each of them, and on the blue marking of the invoice itself, you can right-click and open link in another tab, and you can actually view the invoice and get back to your original invoice list. So that is a useful tool if anybody is trying to find their way around Xero, and also keep an eye on multiple tabs and multiple things at the same time. If you've got multiple screens, it's very useful because you can have some of the information on different screens. Just moving on to the reporting side, what some of the clients find useful is what we use is the favorites. So if we have, say, specific reports, and we want those reports to be just coming up here, because this is your drop-down, all of these are marked as your favorites. So you can go and edit these favorites yourself. If you want a specific report that you want to look at every day, then you can allocate that. But how you make and untick these, you can reduce the number of reports too if you don't want to see everything, is going into all reports, and you can star them. So each of these with the stars are marked as favorite. So if I want to see, don't want to necessarily see the balance sheet, I want to see the accounts receivables, and I don't want to see the cash summary. That will mean only those two are then available for me. So it's quicker. There's no many things coming up on the drop down that you're not going to be looking at all. So that is a useful tool just to make the viewing so much easier and on the reporting side. One thing that some people are not aware of is the tracking codes. I don't know if anybody are currently using any of the tracking codes. What the tracking codes mean is it helps you with just distinguishing certain sections. So if you have two departments and you want to see what the performance or the cost element and the sales element in these departments are, you can actually allocate a tracking code for each of these departments, and it will help you monitor and produce a report for that department itself. Or if it's an area code or anything like that, then you can also do that by area. How you organize the tracking codes is under settings, general settings, and you'll see tracking coming up, and you can actually set up your tracking in this area. Just get rid of that. And you can have the tracking, for instance, set up a region for yourself, and then set up each specific region. And how you then edit these, you can just add another region to it. So how it's tracking it is coming back to each of the sale or the purchase invoice. So if I, for instance, want to create a sales invoice, I say new, and let's just pick one. I'm going to invoice Ridgewood Bank, and we're going to just do today's date. That's one of the shortcuts I'll be showing you soon enough, but the tracking side of this will pop into your invoice. This column will be created in each, if it's a sale or a purchase invoice or any other document. It will actually give you the opportunity to link that through a specific region. This will also give you the chance then to split your invoice into four different regions if you want to do that. If you want to allocate that through to, split it accordingly to, percentage-wise to each of the regions, and that will then keep track of your specific cost. That cost and the sale is then allocated to that specific tracking region. And when you run a report, you can actually specify to only allocate that specific tracking code in that report. So if you run a profit and loss, you can allocate that through. Another thing that on the finding a way around and the reporting on Xero is that could be useful is when you do the default nominal, and you can set this up so that when you, just to reduce spending time typing in a tax code in this section, you can actually set up certain accounts with a default tax code, and also that will help you just get through all the typing and entering data very quickly. So what we do is you can set that up through the chart of accounts, and you can go into your expense codes, and you can pick one, say direct wages, and you can actually select that as a default, no VAT, and each time you select that code, that nominal code, it will automatically default to no VAT. So that's a useful thing to set up from the start with your nominal codes itself. What we can do, also another thing that we picked up is to customize your reports, where sometimes people want to see certain things on the profit and loss grouped together, and this could be useful just from a point of view where you want to see all your property costs in one section, and you don't want a profit and loss of all the transactions in one group area. You want that broken down a little bit. And how you can do this is going through your layout options. You can actually go and edit this layout. And it gives you the chance to create a second file where you can play around with, or you can, I normally will save it as a separate node, say demo 2, because I'm currently using the demo company, but it will give you the option then to edit this and use that as a default or as just a separate report for something else. But how you can group certain sections, you see there is a couple of all the nominals have been brought in, but if I want to group all my property costs, I can select the rates and the rent, I can select my electricity, and I can scroll back up and I can say group selection, and I can say my group will be allocated through, let's say it will be property cost, property expenses, and I can group it in. And then what will happen is it will group these property expenses where you want it to be. And if you want to edit that, you can go and edit the group, and I can go and allocate it where there's operating expenses. I can just move it. That's what makes it so much easier, where just to group certain sections. If I save this and go back to my report, it will then change, and what I'll get is a separate section where all the property is then added up, and you get a subtotal there, which could be useful. And this could be done throughout the report, where you can group certain elements. If you want to see motor costs or advertising, marketing, you've got multiple accounts, then you can group them together, as some people like to keep all their salaries and national insurance and wages and bonuses as a separate group, and which give them a good idea of how much money they spend on staffing. It also depends on which industry you're in, which could be really useful to do that. Another thing on the reporting and just finding a way and dealing with maintenance of your Xero account is a useful tool to look at your contacts and make sure you don't have multiple contacts because you can actually have one contact that can be both a supplier and a customer. And in this case, you don't want 2 or 3 exactly the same client or the supplier. You don't want multiple ones in your list because it gets too much. There's too many of them. So you can actually go and do a bit of housekeeping. In this case, there's 2 24 locks. One is called limited, the other one is just locks. So somebody has typed in the 24 locks and somebody else created the 24 locks. So, but I think it's a bit of housekeeping just to make sure we only end up with one of each. And how you can get rid of these is actually merging them into one. So I want to merge the 24 locks into the limited company. So I can select that, and then I can click on merge and get the opportunity to say where I want to merge it to. So I want to merge it to 24 locks limited and say yes. And what will happen is if there's transactions in the first one, it will actually merge it into the other, and you will end up with one customer or contact in this case. So you'll have one contact left of each, and all the transactions will then be kept in there. So that's a good way to also streamlining, make it easier to browse around and have not too many lines and pages to go through. In this case, there's already 2 pages, so you can create contacts in the demo company. But that's a way to reduce that. Now to just have a look at some of the tricky transactions. I'm sure some of you would know some of the shortcut ways to do things, but I just like to touch on these just to make sure everybody is, have that knowledge that they can do certain things easier and play around with Xero more to get that through. The first thing I want to make sure is everybody is aware of the copy and of invoices. So if I have an invoice that is a recurring invoice every month, we're getting the same invoice, or even if you don't have a recurring one, but it's an invoice from the same, say the same customer or the same supplier, you can actually use the copy function where you can use an invoice that's been created and approved, or you can even copy a draft one, and you can say invoice. You can either copy that, or you can use a repeat function where if it's like a rental invoice that you're going to get in and have to post every time each month, you can actually set it up that it's a repeat. Then you don't need to automatically create one. It will create a draft, and all you need to do is approve it each month. So that will save time just to make sure you don't have to do the same thing over and over again. It helps you on just creating some of the work, helping you with some of the work to do. In this case, I can go in and copy this invoice, and all I need to do here is make sure I edit the details on this invoice. So a new invoice number, if need be, will be created for a sales invoice. For a purchase invoice, it's then useful to allocate the supplier invoice number there. And this could be done with credit notes as well. I'll touch on the credit notes in a second. Just want to share with you some of the quick ways to create things in it's not necessary to create contacts only in the contacts tab. You can actually create, as you type in here, you can actually create a new supplier or a customer as you type in. It won't have all the details like the email and the addresses on, but you can create those as a new contact or a new sales supplier. And so that is definitely possible in this case. I'm just missing. Another shortcut way is if you're in your date column, and you can either type in, because we're in November, you can type in 1 and press enter. It will automatically filter the rest in. It will know it's November and it's 2013. You can only type in the day if it's today's date. So if you want to say, for instance, you want to allocate yesterday, then it will. And it's not working at this moment, but it does have that function. And if you've got, say, for instance, today's date in, then you can just say that it's a first today. You tab along. And the shortcut here is if you want 30 days from now, you can just type in +30, press enter or tab, and it will then allocate the +30. Or if it's 7 days, you can type in +7 and it will drop in 7 days. So you don't need to type out the whole address itself. It will automatically then just add together those dates itself. Another little thing is that's pretty new, which they've introduced into Xero, is an inbuilt calculator. So if I've got like a summary of, say, parking expenses, and I just want to group them all together in one line, I can actually just add it up. I can type in 5 + 5 and then just press enter, and it will automatically add it up. So it will help you with certain transactions, adding a few things together. If it's on a supplier invoice, then you can add it all up. So it's got an inbuilt calculator that will help you with that. Another feature is that some people might not know about. Instead of creating your nominal codes here in settings and chart of accounts, you can actually create ones straight here from this column where you have to choose your nominal. If the nominal is not on this list, then you can actually just click on add a new account, and it will give you a feature to add a new one and be able to post straight away to that invoice as it is. So that's another shortcut little tip where you can create a quick nominal account and you can actually start posting straight away to it. It will be useful to just have a quick look and see where you want it to slot in, because if it's an expense code and you particularly want it between audit and bank fees, you can choose an available number, and then that will be then allocated through. So if I want 402, let's say for instance I want bookkeeping, I can type in 402. I can say it's an overhead. I can go save that, and it will tell me if the number is available or not, and I can actually just tab on, and my default setting was on 20%. You can actually then at the same time as you're creating this, choose your default tax rate, so it always will automatically jump. You can always check it if it needs to be overridden. You can still do that. You can allocate the no VAT or exempt expense if it is. Then what will be useful is just to show you on the credit notes is if you have any credit notes that needs to be created, I'll just go back and select one of these invoices, for instance. If you've got an invoice that's currently waiting payment and you need to raise a credit note, you can actually raise the credit note straight from the invoice. You can allocate here and you could just say add credit note. And what it does, it will keep all the information you'll need to put in the date. So normally credit notes you'll agree when the credit notes needs to be applied, and you can then immediately apply it. So if I want to choose, say, today's date, and all the information stays the same as because you're crediting the invoice itself, then you can go and approve it. And what it does, it will then allocate an invoice, a credit note straight for, and again set it off against the invoice itself. When you do get, you also get the opportunity, if you didn't match it at that stage, you can create a separate credit note. If you don't want to offset it against any particular invoice, you can create a new credit note from scratch. And once you've approved this credit note, you can actually go in and you can match it off. Let me quickly show you. If you have and that's another feature. If you just start typing in your nominal description, you'll get used to your different nominal names that you use, and you can actually just go in and start typing, and it will filter it through for you to do. So if I approve this credit note, I will get the opportunity to match that off against any other invoices. So at this stage, this one has not got the ability. Let me just create a sales invoice for this. And then you can see how the two tie up against each other. Just make sure you use the correct nominals. Then that will be a useful thing to do. So if I have if I have an invoice, it will either pop up, and if you create a credit note, it will pop up with this message saying allocate outstanding credit note, and that will automatically do that for you, for yourself, and you can go in and allocate the credit note against that, and it will all square off. If in this case, just if I go through to the pedals, and just to give you a quick view on the credit note, you always do have the ability to edit these credit notes. So you can unlink your credit note, or you can allocate it to another nominal code itself, and so Xero makes it pretty easy to tailor these type of transactions. What I also want to show you is just if you've got payments on account, or you've taken a sales invoice and you've allocated a payment against that, then you've posted it against the wrong invoice, and you need to just get rid of it or unlink the two and then match it against the right invoice. So in this case, I've just selected this Reachway University. The best way, because what we're doing in the bank, we are matching it against the sales invoice, and the two are linked pretty easy. And what we need to do is, if, for instance, we go link Reachway University, and we discovered, oh, I've matched it against the wrong invoice, what you need to do is go back, and you need to go and search for that. I'll probably find it easier. To go straight to the contact. And if you notice that that payment was matched against the wrong invoice, you can actually go into your invoice itself, and under the options, you can click on the payment itself. You can click on the payment, open the payment, and then remove and redo this. What it does, it will drop the payment back into your unreconciled items, and you can actually go into your bank account again and go and reconcile that item again. So I've got it back in my bank, and now I can actually go and find the correct invoice to match against. So you've got that ability where you can, if you by accident you've matched the wrong payment against an invoice, you can actually go remove and redo that, and then go and rematch it against the correct sales or supplier invoice in that case anyway. And that will unreconcile that transaction into your bank, and you can go and reconcile it again against the correct transaction. In some cases where you receive a payment, and what I'm going to probably look at is it's one of these transactions here where let me just see which one am I going to choose. Let's see. Let's say take Smart Agency. If they paid us too much money, and some part of it is for an overpayment, which would be part of another invoice that's partly worked on at the moment. So it's not been invoiced yet, but some of the money will just need to lie on the account. What this normally does, it always wants to look for an invoice, and in this case, I can go and search for Smart, and they've actually paid that invoice, but they've paid £500 more. So I need to reconcile my bank, and I don't want to. What do I need to do with the £500? So I want to leave that as payment on account. Now, how you can do that with payments on account is you can go to New, Spend Money, and you can actually then choose the overpayment function there, and then you can allocate your description say for an invoice that's for the 30th, or you can have your own detail there, and it will allocate that to the payment on account, and you can save it and still reconcile the bank. And when you do get through, so you can go in, say okay, and that payment will disappear from your bank reconciliation, and you've got a payment on account at this stage. What we can do is we can quickly go and have a look at that account and see what is happening. Just to fall for it. So if you go into the account, it will show that there is a payment on account. Of course, if the details are in there, and you can click on that, and you can then allocate the credit against an invoice. So you can later on get rid of that payment on account and actually allocate it to an invoice where it belongs. And so that could be a useful thing to do in making things easier to reconcile the bank. Another thing is somebody asked me about just to get rid of a couple of pennies. Now Xero has got a function, if we're back at the bank reconciliation, and for instance, if somebody like Cooper Street Bakery has overpaid us with a small amount, so I can go in, I want to match this, find and match this, and I can just type in Cooper, and I see they paid me 5p more, but I'm not going to refund them, and I just want to get rid of this 5p. So what you can do is use a small feature that's the adjustments in Xero, and you can actually go and do a minor adjustment, and you can say it's 5p, and it will get rid of that for you, and you can just go reconcile, and that will drop out, and your supplier invoice are cleared with that payment, and you don't have to worry about the 5p overpayment to worry about. The same can be done with sales invoices too, so you can have both on the supplier and you don't sit with any pennies on as a payment on account unless you want to allocate that as a payment, as an overpayment, and allocate it through as a payment on account. And then the next section I want to touch on is what's new in Xero. Xero develops their software quite regularly, and you'll see some of the messages popping up at the top that they're going offline, there's a new version coming up or new features. So they try and work on suggestions of everybody bringing new things. Now, one thing they have brought in, we had part of this at some stage. We had part of this in the feature where we can actually attach a document to an invoice. So just to recap on that, if you have an invoice, you can actually create a attachment to that, and you can click on the attachment function right there next to your options, and you can actually upload a file. But the new feature that Xero has brought in is this library side, where you can actually import and create folders for yourself. Now, the library you can find under settings and files, which is then giving you the option where you can create folders. So if you want to save a couple of contracts on the web, which they supply you with some storage space, you can actually upload the files in there. Or if you've got multiple files, you can upload them all and then go into your sections, for instance, sales or even purchases. You can then, like say, if you've got a specific sales agreement and you want to keep it close to the contact or to the sales invoice, you can actually go select the invoice and then upload, either pull it through from the library or upload the file directly from, say, where you've saved it. And normally the best option is having a PDF file to be uploaded, make it small and convenient. Another thing what useful is, say for HP agreements, if you upload a file, you can attach that to the original HP transaction, or you can have a folder in your file section, and you can have that available for your accountants to view, so they don't hound you for a copy of that anyway at some stage, which is useful for us to have that information. But that's not just limited to that. So any other documentation that will be useful on a day-to-day basis could be allocated through to your library. So that's a new feature that's pretty handy for anybody if they don't want to be bogged down by too much paperwork and have a scanned copy, PDF copy on the folder, and could be accessed anywhere in the world. Another new feature, just to make you aware of, is working with purchase orders. I know some clients don't use purchase orders, but it's just to make you aware that a purchase order can be created. They've got this little feature here. If that drops off, you can create a new purchase order, which then can be made into an invoice itself, and that means you don't have to retype any of the information. So the information could be pulled through to an invoice, and then it could be used for having an invoice that could be approved and then paid later on. So for anybody using the purchase orders, the purchase order could be created. That's a new feature where you can create purchase orders, send that away to a client. Either you can send a purchase order through to a supplier, you can email that through, and they can replace that with a supplier invoice. The two can be matched up, and then it could be approved for payment itself. That's about it for today. If there's any other useful tips, we will definitely keep you up to date with that and get you more involved. If there's any other questions, please let us know, and we can help you with that. Thank you for the